Hello everyone and welcome! Riot is getting better and better at connecting their new champions to the current lore without creating new holes in the story. The story of Ivern Bramblefoot is magical, mystical and simply unique. So let's dive right into it. It all begins in the early days of Freljord. Here, Ivern served as a warrior with iron resolve. However, he was powerless when the Iceborn arrived. They looked down at him and his kind and saw nothing but weak mortals trying to challenge their will. Of course, Ivern couldn't stand that, and he plotted to overthrow their new masters. According to a legend, there was a faraway land reachable from the harbors of Frostguard that was the source of all magic. That place was the key to Ivern's plan. So he gathered his brothers in arms and set sail into the unknown. In the lands of Freljord he was known as Ivern the Cruel, so it was obvious that he wanted to seize the power for his own, so that he could break the Iceborn himself. As their ships vanished beyond the horizon, everything changed. The sea threw wave after wave at their fleet, shaking the resolve of many of their men. But cowardice was not allowed, and Ivern killed those who tried to run. Finally, they arrived at the shores of the land of legends, Ionia. The native warriors tried to protect their land, but Ivern stood true to his title, and he easily broke through their resistance. Soon Ionians surrendered and they led the army of Freljord to a sacred grove known as Omikaelan, the heart of the world. The frozen warriors thought it was a gift, a sign of loyalty, but it was there where they faced their mightiest enemy. Strange creatures, half man and half animals, leapt at them from the jungles surrounding them. Many of them died in the matter of seconds, but Ivern pressed on. In the heat of the battle, Ivern discovered what the Ionians held so sacred: the God Willow. A massive tree, dripping with long leaves that shimmered with golden light. While his men were being slaughtered in the final assault, Ivern stood mesmerized by the mystical tree. Seeking to shatter the resolve of his foes, he gripped his battle axe and swung at the tree with the force of 10 men. He felt no impact. He felt nothing. There was only blinding light when he cleaved the God Willow and extinguished all life force within it. What happened next was even stranger. His hands fused and became one with the battle axe and the God Willow's hardwood. His limbs grew in length and became knotty and rough to the touch. He stood helpless, as the rest of his body did the same. Within moments he was 10 feet tall, staring down over a field of slain brothers. He could not feel his heart pumping, but he was awake and aware. He heard a voice deep inside him.
"Watch,"
it said. In what felt like seconds, the bodies decayed under legions of colorful mushrooms and buzzing insects, their flesh consumed by birds and wolves, bones rotten into fertile soil, and seeds from fruit the warriors ate sprouted into trees. Hills rose and fell like lungs gently filling with breath. Leaves and petals pulsed like colorful hearts. From the death that surrounded him, life exploded in ways too numerous to believe. Never had Ivern beheld such beauty. Life, in all its forms, was being tangled together like an impossible knot that didn't want to be untied. He reflected on the mistakes he'd made. His cruelty now turned into sorrow. He wept, and tears sprang up on the bark and leaves that now covered his newly tree-like body. Am I becoming the God Willow? He wondered. Then the voice inside Ivern told him something new.
"Listen,"
it said. So he did. At first he heard nothing. Then the whimpers of countless beasts, the bawling of rivers, the howling of trees and the dripping of tears of moss. They lamented in God Willow's death. in a symphony of mourning. Remorse washed over Ivern, and he cried out in forgiveness. A tiny squirrel snuggled at his leg. He felt the gaze of nearby animals. Plants reached out for him with their roots. Nature's gaze fixed on him, and he felt the seeping warmth of forgiveness. When Ivern finally moved, over a century had passed and the world felt new. The violence and cruelty of his old self were echoes in his heart. Never again would he be the man who brought so much destruction. He even asked the voice deep inside, why him? Why was he spared? The voice spoke the third time.
Grow,
it said. This puzzled him. Was he supposed to grow or help the world grow? He decided it was probably both. After all, who couldn't use a bit of extra growth? Ivern looked at himself, his bark-like skin, the mushrooms on his arms, the family of squirrels resting on him. This new body astounded him. He found he could dig his toes deep into the soil and commune with roots and insects alike. Even the dirt itself had opinions. Ivern decided an excellent start was to get to know all the world's inhabitants. And so he did. It took a few centuries. How many exactly? Ivern couldn't tell. Because time flies when one is having such a good time. As he wandered the world, he became friends with all creatures, big and small. He shortened the inchworm's path, played tricks with bramblebacks, hugged elmarks, and laughed with wizened elderfungs. Everywhere Ivern went, forest blossomed and beasts dwelt in harmony. Sometimes he helped unjustly wounded creatures. In one instance he found a wounded stone golem. Knowing the poor creature was going to die, he fashioned her a new heart from a river pebble. It didn't take long, and the golem became Ivern's devoted life friend. He named her Daisy, after the flowers that mysteriously sprouted from her stone body. Sometimes he encountered humans, many of them somewhat peaceful. They called him Bramblefoot or Greenfather, but their behavior always made Ivern retreat. Greed was a nasty trait. They took more than they could give, a cruel way to live. Then the voice inside him spoke for the fourth time. It said, in that moment, the resolve he once had has returned, but this time there was no cruelty. If he was called to be the God Willow, he needed to cultivate humanity, help them watch, listen, and grow. Time flew by as Ivern lived peacefully in his own forest. One might say that the life of a tree may be boring, but a single tree can save many lives by simply standing still for millennia. Things were going swimmingly, until the bushes started whispering about dark doings on the edge of the forest. Hunters, they cried through their roots, alarming half of the forest. Hunting wasn't so bad, thought Ivern, for nothing is wasted in the cycle of life. But the bushes had worried the robins, who told the butterflies, and if butterflies knew a secret, so did the entire forest. So Ivern stood up and marched forward to see what was happening. With each of his flower-blooming steps, the alarm grew more frantic. 3 of them, nettered the squirrels. Eyes like twin blood moons, gibbered the scuttle crabs as they hid in the river. More bloodthirsty than elmarks, proclaimed the elmarks. Ivern calmed everyone down and told them to hide until the trouble passed. He pretended not to notice Daisy following him, since she thought herself to be quite sneaky. He saw an 8-tusked shagyak dead in the grass, 3 arrows stuck in its neck. A single tear slipped down Ivern's eye, but before it dropped, a squirrel he'd named Micus climbed up his leg and wiped it off his cheek. The corpse was missing 8 shimmering tusks. Ivern touched the ground and a circle of daisies bloomed around the dead shagyak. He saw a baby stone-scale viper slithering away. Stone-scale vipers were wise beyond their years. "Safe?" the snake asked. Ivern knew snakes were embarrassed by their lisps, and for a long time had avoided words with a sibilant sound. He had challenged them to embrace the words they feared the most, but they took the lesson to heart and now spoke exclusively in words beginning with S. Snakes. Such overachievers.
It's safe now, little one. Coil up here and watch the CZECH for me. I'll return once I get to the bottom of this.
On the other side of the forest, 3 hunters were on their quest to collect as many tusks as they could. Rich people were willing to pay good money for them. Niko, the square-jawed hunter with one eye, uncovered another set of CZECH hoofprints. She gestured at Edo, a rich city man with a whalebone bow. He grinned back at her, which made Rizbel, the youngest of them, shiver. They tracked down the beast and all readied their bows. The CZECH was feasting on a patch of grass. They waited for it to lift its head. It was important to hit its neck while the muscles were tense, to keep the blood flow going. This was the only way to harvest high-quality tusks. It had to be while the beast was alive. Just as they were ready to fire, the grass around them began to grow. In a second it grew up from ankles to their heads. Edo dropped his bow and Niko couldn't believe her one good eye. Rizbel mistakenly released an arrow from her shaking bow. She backed up against the nearest tree, terrified. "I told you those woods were cursed," Rizbel whispered. "We should leave now." "I've dealt with this sorcery before," Niko said. "I will do this the old way." She pulled out a dagger, followed by Edo doing the same, and they sneaked into the tall grass. Rizbel waited where she stood, holding her breath. She remembered stories her grandmother used to tell her, stories of strange creatures of magic that wandered this world. Just children's tale, she reminded herself. Moments later, a heavy sound of smashing rocks echoed through the forest. Edo and Niko raced out of the bush in full speed. Behind them, Rizbel noticed a single flower dancing. It was a rather curious sight. She then realized it was getting closer. The grass parted and there stood a behemoth of stone and moss.
Daisy, be careful and gentle.
Rizbel grabbed her satchel of tusks and ran after Niko and Edo, trying to remember the route that led back to their camp. But everywhere she went, the grass grew to block her path, and soon she realized the forest was toying with her. After a long time of running in circles, she gave up on the idea of escaping, and decided to walk back directly through the tall grass. Ivern watched as the young huntress tripped out of the grassy maze and approached the CZECH's body. She looked terrified. She clearly had never seen anything or anyone quite like himself before. He tried to be gentle, but humans tend to be so individual in their reactions.
Please, don't be frightened, unless that's your natural state, in which case, fright away, I'll wait. I really don't mind.
It wasn't Ivern's intention to frighten anyone, but no one can account for another being's experience. "Get on with it," Rizbel said with quivering voice. "I've trespassed. I know. I am at your mercy. Just let it be quick."
Be quick,
Ivern shrugged.
Certainly, it didn't cross my mind that you might have better place to be. Very well then.
The girl closed her eyes and lifted her chin, exposing her throat. She reached her hand behind her back, ready to pull out a dagger. If he came for her, there would be a surprise.
But I only want to know why,
Ivern said, gesturing at the CZECH's body. His arm stretched longer than it should, to the dead beast's back, where he lovingly stroked its bloodied fur. Rizbel drew her dagger and then felt a sharp pain in her ankle. A cold sensation spread up her leg. When she looked down, she saw a stone-scaled viper, the most venomous snake in all of Alderwood. Out of anger and instinct, she lashed out at the snake.
No!
Ivern shouted. Viney roots sprouted up from the soil and caught her arm, preventing her strike. She dropped her dagger in her struggle to break free. I am going to die, she cried. The venom's coldness spread up past her knees. The serpent slithered up to Ivern's ear. Sorry, he hissed. Straddled. Please, Risbel said. Help me. Ivern thought for a second.
Ah yes.
His honey eyes twinked with an idea.
There's one thing that loves shaggy eggs, especially dead ones. And please, forgive Cyrus. He's only recently hatched and doesn't know how to control his venom. Gave you a full dose, I'm afraid. He's asked me to tell you that he's awfully sorry. You straddled him and he reacted purely on instinct. Now, watch.
He knelt down before the shaggy egg's body and touched the ground. He hummed a deep melody and odd purple mushrooms started popping from the corpse. Soon there was only fur, bones and an army of violet mushrooms.
Ah, Stinkslave funks.
Ivern sighed. He plucked one delicately.
Always so punctual.
The vines retracted from Risbel's body and she fell on the ground. Her hand immediately grabbed for her heart.
Eat this,
Ivern said and offered the purple mushroom to the dying woman.
It might not taste like salamander dew or sunshine, but it's not as bad as Lipperdick apples.
With a slight hesitation, she did eat the mushroom, and in fact, it tasted like bitter tea. A disappointing final meal, she thought. Then, the icy grip around her heart retreated. Within minutes, her legs worked again. You're him, aren't you? The Greenfather. Ivern shrugged as if he didn't know.
You know what we could do here?
He said, turning his attention to the shaggy egg bones.
Moss always loves to pretty up the place.
As soon as he said it, a thick carpet of moss crept over the bones. Together with the mushrooms, the sight was now beautiful.
Sheldon would love how beautiful his bones turned out to be. Badgers will use his ribs as shelter from the autumn storms. Nothing is ever wasted,
Ivern said.
It seemed so senseless, but it makes perfect sense. If it wasn't killed, you wouldn't have lived.
We wanted its tusks, Risbel said. She fixated her eyes on her boots in shame. Rich people clamor for them, willing to pay a lot.
I remember money. It's a rarely good motivator.
I knew we shouldn't have killed it. My grandmother used to tell me that if one must kill, one must use all parts to honor the beast.
I would love to meet your grandmother,
Ivern said. She is gone to the ground.
Returning to the soil which the soil gave is noble.
I'm sorry, Risbel said after a long moment of silence.
All life is precious.
The gentleness in his voice drove Risbel to tears. Ivern patted her on the head.
I probably couldn't have handled the whole thing better myself. I have so much to remember about humans, and so much I had forgotten to ever learn.
He helped Risbel to her feet.
I must be off now. I promised the tadpoles of Southern Pond that I would monitor their elections for the King of Lilypads. It's quite the contentious race.
The adventure was over, but there was one last thing left to do. Risbel took the tasks and borrowed them near one of the forest's rivers. With the prayers of honor her grandmother taught her, she bowed her head before the grave she created. From the depth of Alderwood, Ivern smiled at the gesture. The shaggy egg herd would be proud. What a story this was! If only you could see the huge smile I had while I was reading this one. This is seriously one of the best stories Riot put together. Not because of how it pushes the lore forward, but simply because of the language and the style in which it was written. I highly recommend everyone to read the story for themselves, as this is truly a unique experience. But for now, thank you everyone so much for watching. You know I really appreciate all of your support. If you enjoyed this video, you can rate it below. There is also the comment section if you have something to say. Social media is there too, in case you feel like talking to me. And as always, thank you come again. So, while Ivern's lore was released, I was actually working on another really big lore event. I kinda talked about it in the previous videos, but I don't really want to spoil the entire project because this is a big video. Probably the size of this one, which should be around 20 minutes, so I have no idea when that one will be released. I hope next week. I should have time, but I don't really have time, but I will work on it anyway. So see you in that one.